Welcome to African Roots, brought to you by DW. In this podcast series, we discover how individuals from across Africa shaped the continent. I'm Cai Nebe.
And I'm Laila Johnson-Salami.
Laila, have you ever been a fan of the Africa Cup of Nations, in football, that is?
Yep, I love AFCON, Kai. Especially when Nigeria are doing well, of course.
Okay. So how does that feel like?
I know you're going to try and get a reaction out of me about how the Super Eagles aren't doing well. Oh, how we didn't qualify for the Olympics. La-di-da-di-da. But no, not today.
I'm not going to be that easy on you. Okay, well, speaking of the Super Eagles, and for those of you who aren't aware, the Super Eagles are the nickname of Nigeria's national football team. Have you noticed that literally every African national football team has a nickname? From the Atlas Lions of Morocco to the Zebras of Botswana?
Yeah, I sure have, but I still don't know where we're going with this.
Okay, well, I actually got quite deep into this rabbit hole, I have to admit.
Kind of like how you're spiraling now.
Let me just get back on track because I stumbled upon the Stallions of Burkina Faso. And for some reason, this stuck with me and it actually opened a whole other chapter, which is what part of this podcast is going to be about today. And it's also about a very specific person.
Who's that?
It's the warrior princess Yennenga.
Interesting. And what does this have to do with the Stallions of Burkina Faso?
Well, okay, we're gonna have to get to that a little bit later in the podcast. But Laila, I need to let you know that Princess Yennenga is a true enigma in West African history and also folklore. She's both a legend and a historical figure, and also a badass.
Yeah, I'm all ears for this one.
First up, there are many references to Princess Yennenga all around Burkina Faso, but the actual details are all a bit, tricky. The first thing you need to know about Princess Yennenga is that she's considered the mother of the Mossi people, Burkina Faso's biggest ethnic group, and there are references to her in various praise songs.
Elle n'était pas une fille comme les autres. Elle était le général de l'armée de Gambaga. Rpanyim de Yennenga wo. Yennenga, rpanyim de Yennenga wo. Yennenga, rpanyim de Yennenga wo. Idranyim Yennenga.
Interesting. And what else do we know about the princess?
Well, this is where it gets vague. Historians believe Princess Yennenga was born sometime between the 11th and the 15th century in Gambaga, the former capital of the Dagomba kingdom in modern-day Ghana. Yennenga was the favorite child of King Ndega, according to oral tradition. But still, she was expected to do domestic chores like cooking, fetching water, carrying wood, and looking after the children. But legend says that she had one particular passion.
And what was that for?
Horses and riding.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's understandable.
Yeah, so she begged her father until he gave in, despite criticism from some of the king's advisors. And lo and behold, Princess Yennenga turns out to be a pretty good horsewoman. And armed with spears and bows, she's also a pretty darn good fighter. And later she fought with her father in raids and conquests, and apparently did so well that King Ndega even gave her her own cavalry. Not just that though, she has this aura among her people who love her. So, this being legend and all, Yennenga is also a sprightly, beautiful young woman. Her slim and slender silhouette is said to have charmed many hearts. But because she was so invaluable to her father as a fighter, King Ndega refused to give his favorite daughter away into marriage.
Wait, so she had her own legion, but she wasn't allowed to get married?
Marriage in those days meant that the daughter had to move away from her home, and Princess Yennenga was so important to the king and the morale of the Dagomba that her father actually kept her under house arrest, not just, wouldn't let her out. He actually kept her under house arrest. And so Yennenga became very lonely until she decided to escape her father's overbearing court.
Well, I guess that's fair enough.
Yeah, and with the help of a guard, she stole a horse and rode north, far away from the Gambaga, which, I guess must have also caused a lot of consternation among the court. And while she's on her mission, she encounters hostiles along the way, and I'll let traditional Burkinabe chief Paseta Titenga explain more.
Lors d'une des batailles,
during one of the battles, the horse is hurt and scared, so it runs far away in the bush. The poor young lady did not know where they were going. The horse stopped at a hut. An elephant hunter named Riale lived there.
d'éléphants qu'on appelle Riare.
Chapter 2.
Yup. So, according to this legend, Riale offers the young princess hospitality, and guess what?
They fall in love, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And the couple then have a son, Chief Titenga again.
Un enfant est venu.
They did not know how to name the child. They thought about it. The horse had made their encounter possible. So the child should bear the name of male horse. Ouedraogo means male horse in Moray language.
And the English name for a male horse is, Laila?
A stallion.
Yes, but there's more to it.
Wait, Cai, sorry to go back here, but just for context, surely it wasn't easy, for the princess, the favorite child of the king, and a cavalry leader to just get up and go.
Well, yeah, bridges had to be rebuilt with King Ndega, who probably considered anyone unworthy of marrying his daughter. So, to make peace with her father, Yennenga sent her son, Ouedraogo, to Gambaga. At first, King Ndega was furious, but then accepted his daughter's apology. Years later, Ouedraogo, after developing into a warrior in his own grandfather's kingdom, returns to Princess Yennenga's home, escorted by a horde of warriors and loaded with gifts. And Prince Ouedraogo and his warriors founded the Morosi village. This becomes the birthplace of the new kingdom and the Mossi people.
Wow.
Now, Ouedraogo to this day is a very common name in Burkina Faso. And the legend of Princess Yennenga as this upstanding, beloved, beautiful, skilled, fearless warrior is still very much prominent in Burkina Faso. Many artists continue to pay tribute to her, including Yili Noma, who we recorded singing this song, this praise song about Princess Yennenga.
Une femme qui était brave, courageuse, une Amazone, une guerrière.
As a woman, she is a warrior we look up to. It was really a way for me of saying, we are today's Yennenga.
Une manière pour moi de dire que voilà, nous sommes les Yennenga d'aujourd'hui.
Yennenga, Yennenga, wo, idranyim Yennenga, ketentera yellowe.
I love this story. Cai, I'm sorry to have to go all the way back to the beginning here. What about the Burkinabe football team's nickname, the Stallions?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because throughout the story, it just shows that the team are just another example of a Burkinabe actually honoring Princess Yennenga's legacy. The stallion is symbolically important as the horse that Princess Yennenga grew famous on and the horse that brought her to the place where the Mossi kingdom was founded. And for those of you who are not sports fans but maybe film lovers, the stallion is also prominent at the most famous Pan-African cinema festival known as FESPACO in Ouagadougou. And the main prize is named Yennenga Stallion, and you literally get a statue of Princess Yennenga in full battle gear on a stallion. And the princess's mount is also on the national emblem of Burkina Faso, and 15 kilometers outside Ouagadougou, a new green and sustainable city called Yennenga is growing.
You know what's so awesome about this story, Cai, of Princess Yennenga, is that despite all of the changing geopolitics of West Africa, it still gets told, and it transcends borders. I also think it's very cool that the FESPACO pays direct tributes to Princess Yennenga. That's really cool.
And that she is a legend around which Burkinabe people can really rally.
Elle était le général de l'armée de Gambaga. De l'armée de Gambaga.
When we come back, we are going across the border into Ghana, where we're going to meet a real-life heroine who refused to bow.
DW African Roots. Find new African Roots episodes on dw.com/African Roots, Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Laila, a heroine who refused to bow.
Yep. So we're in Ghana now, and it's 1900. Okay, so this is a turbulent time on what is then the Gold Coast.
So, before Ghana existed as a country then?
Exactly that. And European colonists and traders had been landing on the coast for centuries, Cai, notoriously in relation to the slave trade. But by now, slavery is illegal, and European powers, more specifically the British, want to control something else.
That being what?
Land. While Germans, Portuguese, and others had built trading ports, none had really been able to build an effective colony or even conquer territory, to be honest. While the Europeans had effectively carved up West African colonies on the map, this didn't necessarily translate into control on the ground.
Why is that?
So, for one, the West African climate and the enormous manpower that was required to subjugate the local people. But beyond that as well, Cai, the local people in question were Ashantis, and they'd been fighting in a string of conflicts since 1824, conflicts to control the coast and the vital trade routes as well. So by 1900, the British and the Ashantis had fought in 4 wars already.
4 wars? My God.
Yeah, 4 wars. And by this point, the British are getting impatient. So what do? They launch on an expedition on the Ashanti capital, Kumasi, to end Ashanti resistance once and for all. Now, right at the center of all of this is Frederick Hodgson and his obsession with the Golden Stool.
The Golden Stool? Is this like an artifact or what is that?
We're going to get to that. Hodgson's mind was on the throne of the Ashanti kingdom. If he could claim it for Queen Victoria and the British Empire, he would have essentially crushed the Ashanti resistance. So in late March 1900, he speaks to the Ashanti leaders, and Hodgson demands that he be presented the Golden Stool to sit on.
Wait, so you're basically saying that Hodgson had this idea that he was going to get a trophy of war, right? So then how did that go down?
Well, among all of these male leaders, there was one woman, Yaa Asantewaa, and she stands out not only because she's a woman, but because this demand enrages her.
Wait, so who is Yaa Asantewaa?
So Yaa Asantewaa, a bit of background for a very unlikely heroine. She was born in 1840 in central Ghana. Now, Yaa Asantewaa got married early. She had 1 child, a daughter.
She started life as an ordinary woman with oral traditions I've collected from her family and other people at Ejusu. She was a farmer who was cultivating granules and onions, other foodstuffs, and so on.
That's Ghanaian historian Dr. Wilhelmina Donkor.
So how did a farmer end up among Kumasi's elite leadership?
Good question. So Yaa Asantewaa's life changed dramatically when her parents died. She was approaching the age of 60 by the time her brother, Kwasi Afrane, became the leader of the Ejisu and named her Queen Mother. More of an honorific title, I would say. But then Kwasi Afrane died shortly after, in 1894. And then when the British exiled Ejisu's new leader 2 years later, Yaa Asantewaa became regent in Ejisu to represent him.
So not really an easy retirement plan then.
And it was about to get a lot tougher. So by 1900, the British had exiled most of the Ashanti leaders, mostly to the Seychelles. And that included King Prempeh the First. Now, this created a leadership vacuum, as you can imagine, and Yaa Asantewaa's new position meant that she was among the chiefs that were invited to meet with, guess who? Frederick Hodgson in 1900.
Okay, but Laila, correct me if I'm wrong here. Hodgson was essentially asking for the Ashanti surrender. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, spot on. But Hodgson blunders into territory that he has no idea about. The Golden Stool was the most sacred object in the Ashanti culture, and it wasn't meant for sitting, Cai. Not by the Ashantis, not by their kings or queens, and certainly not by Hodgson. For the Ashantis, the Golden Stool was more like a symbol of power, but actually a metaphysical and spiritual representation of the Ashanti people. Still, though, the Ashanti chiefs considered giving in to Hodgson's demand to avoid further fighting. Don't forget, there'd been 4 wars by this point.
Yeah.
But then at which point, Yaa Asantewaa says in these famous words,
"If you, the men of Asante, will not go forward, then we will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white man. We will fight till the last of us falls on the battlefield. If you chiefs will not fight, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarment."
Okay, and what happens?
Well, Hodgson had irked a lot of Ashantis with his demand, as you can imagine. But Yaa Asantewaa galvanizes them and a war breaks out called the War of the Golden Stool. But it's also widely known as the Yaa Asantewaa War. Dr. Wilhelmina Donkor again.
I will say that Yaa Asantewaa teaches us that we should be prepared to stand for what we believe in. Whether it was her lineage that she was concerned about, at least she was prepared to stand up and be counted to fight for them. If it's the dignity of Asanteman, yes, she stood up. So that's an important lesson you learn from Yaa Asantewaa.
Yaa Asantewaa not only started the war, but she also played an active role in it. Now, even though she was older, there is evidence of her visiting the war fronts and inspiring soldiers and even supplying them with weapons. And at first, the Ashantis encircle Hodgson's party and force them to take refuge and defend the fort at Kumasi. The Ashanti were essentially self-governing. It was only really when the British sent a new fighting force consisting of British and Nigerian soldiers, that was after losing over 1,000 men, did they then recapture the city. Now, the 5th and final Anglo-Ashanti War is the bloodiest, with thousands of casualties on both sides.
Wow. And what happened to Yaa Asantewaa in all of this? I know you said she was helping out, but I don't imagine she was actually fighting, right?
Well, the Ashantis finally capitulated in September 1900. Yaa Asantewaa and other leaders were forced to surrender before being exiled to the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. Dr. Donkor again.
Yaa Asantewaa was found, the British took her, and knowing who she had been and what she has been able to do, they did not allow her to stay, but quickly sent her to the coast and then transported her across the ocean to Seychelles in the Indian Ocean.
Now, by 1902, the British annexed the Ashanti territories and with it ended their independence. As for Yaa Asantewaa, her status as a Ghanaian national hero was, of course, cemented.
Can imagine.
If you want to look at it, you could say that Yaa Asantewaa, in a way, was one of the people who inspired Ghanaian independence because she was a nationalist. She was saying to the people of Ashanti and indirectly to Ghanaians and Africans that this is our land. Nobody from overseas should come and dictate to us how we should live.
That's Daniel Baker Glover, a Ghanaian filmmaker and a political commentator. He describes Yaa Asantewaa as a woman who inspired the struggle for independence in Ghana. Not just that, though.
And she was especially insulted by the fact that the British governor demanded the Golden Stool. So I think, in a way, it is symbolic of what Africans are saying today, that our resources belong to us, whether cultural resources, mineral resources, our lands, the people. We are Africans and we must determine what we do with our resources. And of course, by taking up the mantle of a war leader, she was telling women that you are equal to men. You are not second-class citizens.
So Yaa Asantewaa would never see Ghana again. She died in the Seychelles in October 1921. Today, though, Ghanaians remember her as an icon of resistance and equality.
One thing I'm wondering about is, in all of this, what did happen to the Golden Stool? the cause of the war.
Hate to break it to you, the Golden Stool was never found. Actually, it's pretty good news, I guess. The Golden Stool was never found, right, by Frederick Hodgson and his men. The Ashantis had hidden it really well. In fact, it was only discovered by accident by some road workers in a forest in 1920. That's 20 years after the war.
So literally by chance. My gosh. Wow. Laila, I think it's a very incredible story and also a very moving story you're telling. And to me, it's just very interesting looking at Yaa Asantewaa and Princess Yennenga, you know, how they occupy a bigger space in their nation's national consciousness, probably more so today than ever before. What do you think?
Absolutely, Cai. Honestly, I couldn't agree more. Both extremely, extremely powerful women in African history and West African history in their own way. And that's where we're going to have to leave things for today. African Roots is a cooperation between Deutsche Welle and the Gerda Henkel Foundation. Special thanks to our producers, Michael Springer, Philip Zadner, and our voiceover artists. Contributions by Richard Tierney, Pinado Abdul-Waba, Ramatu Mahmoud Abubakar, Jawando Kumalo, and Sela Oneko. I'm Laila Johnson-Salami.
And I'm Kai Nebe.